Welcome back! I am here with an exciting video. It's going to be a little more relaxing and quiet, but exciting. And I have this gigantic brick of a book, and it's called Monet, The Triumph of Impressionism. It's almost 600 pages long. It was written by Daniel Wildenstein and is published by Taschen Books. And it's enormous. I mean, you can see the back. Beautiful, beautiful paintings inside. I just cracked it open just to take a peek inside, and I'm not disappointed at all. It really looks exciting. So, a little about Monet and a little about me. I don't think it's an overstatement to say I've been obsessed with Monet since very young. I've used Monet's paintings as a resource for a long time, and even in grade school I'd have an art class, and usually the two major influences that my teacher picked were Monet and Van Gogh, and so that's where my love of Impressionism began. And of course Paul Cézanne and Poussin and all these others would follow. But it was really Monet who was the forefather of Impressionism and later even abstraction. And although abstraction, there could be an argument that even the old masters were onto that sort of, there's, as they say, nothing new is created under the sun. So I'm not going to make an argument regarding that, but Impressionism, certainly, he was one of the leading forefathers of. So we're going to read the inside spread of this. Don't worry, there will be many, many videos like this in the future, and I think it'll be fun to get through this whole book eventually, because it does seem like a delightful book to read, and really useful for our expanding our intellect and expanding our vocabulary of artists. Okay, so this is what the introduction says. Master of the sublime, the essential impressionist. No other artist apart from J.M.W. Turner tried as hard as Claude Monet to capture light itself on canvas. Of all the impressionists, it was the man Cézanne called only an eye, but my God, what an eye, who stayed true to the principle of absolute fidelity to the visual sensation, painting directly from the object. It could be said that Monet reinvented the possibilities of color. Whether it was through his early interest in Japanese prints, his time as a conscript in the dazzling light of Algeria, or his personal acquaintance with the major painters of the late 19th century, the work of Monet produced throughout his long life would change forever the way we perceive both the natural world and its attendant phenomena. The high point of his explorations was the late series of water lilies, painted in his own garden at Giverny, which, in their approach towards almost total formlessness, are really the origin of abstract art. This biography does full justice to this most remarkable and profoundly influential artist, and offers numerous reproductions and archive photos alongside a detailed and insightful commentary. This is a quote by Claude Monet. For me, the subject is of secondary importance. I want to convey what is alive between me and the subject. That's wonderful. Gets you thinking about even the practice of painting itself. Claude Monet died 1926 and was born 1840. He lived through times of peace, times of war. He died close to the completion of, just after the completion of World War I. And in fact, his water lilies, some of them were sort of, what do I want to say, not conscripted, but kind of conceived as a peacetime installment. I know there's one museum that's turned to a permanent exhibition of his water lilies for the UK, in which it was kind of, the water lilies were an homage to all the fallen heroes of World War I. So, he, although he lived in such, I guess, kind of a volatile age, he did always see the sublime, and he did always see kind of a joyful atmosphere through his Impressionism. And I think that's what I take away from Impressionism in general, is just how happy some of these paintings can make you. Here's the contents. We have beginnings, landscape paintings, early travels, new destinations, family ties, refuge and inspiration, career, open air study, orangery, and an index. So 11 chapters. Later in life, he would go blind, almost completely blind, legally blind, and in this way, he's similar, in my mind, to Beethoven, who once almost completely deaf while composing. Well, yeah, no, I think he was completely deaf when composing his Ninth Symphony. So a lot of these geniuses, wouldn't take their bodily decomposition as an excuse to forget their artistry, and I think that's very powerful. And in fact, it reminds me of, who was it who did the black paintings? Goya, who did the black paintings, and he went deaf, and I think he started going blind too. And then we get these masterpieces, that really are kind of a struggle to exist, but are really impactful. This is The Walk, Women with a Parasol. Excuse me. No? Women in the Garden, 1866. My bad. And then on the back, it's A Walk, Woman with a Parasol. One of his most famous paintings. And I can see why. So much energy. Okay. Origins and Birth, The Move to Le Havre, The Schoolboy. Here's another painting called The Walkers. It was done in 1865, so he would have been, 25 years old. Beautiful painting. Really soft, enigmatic. I love that. Simple painter, a very simple painter, and not needlessly complex, just existing and painting and looking for signs of life. Here's some, I'm assuming these are some sketches he made as a schoolboy. Kind of naughty, it's kind of funny. Yeah. And then his still lifes, you can really, I like it because you can see each brushstroke. I mean, you really can. Look at the pheasant. You can see the blocks of color and the dog, the musket, the background. He had an aptitude, you can tell, for dry on dry painting. Do you see that? How each painting's kind of matte? Really an attractive style. Very form heavy, blocks of color, not caring too much about the tiny little brush strokes, this is kind of one of his more iconic ones. Let's see here, Greyhound's Head. You've probably seen it on Pinterest. It's a cute little greyhound, but don't you see that? How each brushstroke is so evident, but it doesn't bother you because when you step back, it actually is really pleasant to see them come together. It's like scaffolding. Oh, here's Meeting Boudon. Monet's notion of seascapes was defined by Gaudin, and he rather disliked the paintings that often hung about his characters at Gravier's. He eventually discovered that the painter was an old friend of the shop's owner. His name was Eugene Boudon. Monet, 15 years his junior, found Boudon's retiring hair, heavy-set face, and big walking boots covered in dust and sand somewhat repulsive. Quote, "You should get to know Monsieur Boudon," the farmer told him. "Whatever people say about him, I can tell you he knows his job. He could give you good advice." The farmer was insistent. Monet was not convinced, but one day he came into the shop without noticing the self-effacing Boudon at the back of the shop. The owner introduced Boudon to, quote, "this young man who has such a talent for caricature." Boudon began by praising Monet's little works. "They're amusing, they're full of zest, full of life, you have a gift," before adding, quote, "I hope you are not going to confine yourself to this kind of a thing," and recommending, quote, study, learn to see and to paint, draw, do landscapes." And since the subject was dear to him, he continued, if we are to believe Thibault-Cizon in some somewhat lyrical vein, the accounts of this first meeting seem to have been embellished. It was not until the summer that Monet made his first working expedition with his new mentor. According to Jean Aubray, It was for this expedition that Monet bought his first paint box. The two men walked around Montguyon Forest, going through the Fréleuse to Roule, northeast of Le Havre. There, Eugène Boudin set up his easel and went to work. This time it was a revelation, quote, I watched more attentively, and then it was as if a veil had been torn aside. I grasped what painting it could be. Interesting. Yes, this is ringing some bells. So Boudin, I think, was responsible for getting him started on his lifelong obsession with landscape painting. Here's a picture of Monet at 20 years old. So this would be 5 years after meeting Boudin. Fun. You get to see some real-life pictures next to, you know, his paintings. Here's the Hotel du Lion d'Or at Chalais and the Hotel du Cheval Blanc at Chalais. So you get to see where Monet stayed, where he took inspiration, and then here's a painting probably in the same township where he drew inspiration. Really fun. This is Farmyard in Normandy in 1863, so he'd be 23 years old. Beautiful. Aptitude for good color and good blocking out of composition, everything like that. Let's see here, this is really fun. Rodin Forest. It's humble, but delightful. Just probably using some burnt umber, I don't know, a little bit of Naples yellow and some sort of blue to get the greens. And then some soft, maybe a Chinese white. Monet was around right when tubes of paint were being invented. And we credit Impressionism, the rise of Impressionism, greatly to the invention of tube paint. Because you could bring your whole box of paints with you. And it revolutionized everything. You could go to the park and suddenly there were, you know, a dozen painters painting away. You didn't have to mix materials, you didn't have to hire someone or buy all these complex mixtures. Of course, you know, the great masters, even as late as, I don't know, the early 20th century, obviously still mix their own paints. We still have painters today who mix their own paints, but it's become very regularized to, or regular to use paint tubes. And so, you know, it must have been pretty exciting. It kind of reminds me of, like, in our contemporary day, the rise of acrylic markers and alcohol markers, like how this has become like a whole new medium, which reminds me, I've really become obsessed with markers and the quickness you can spread them around, but I'm getting off topic. Let's show one more painting. See how he's sticking to the composition of a kind of a giant V across the painting, you know? It can be summarized with these two shapes kind of pressing in towards the center line. And so you get this taper effect, and immediately you're pushed into the perspective, right? And you can't really escape it, it's inevitable. The horizon line is set pretty low, so you get this beautiful, airy, majestic look at the skyline, and then he puts something in the foreground that's stabilizing you right in the picture. I mean, look at the treatment of this soft gradient from a yellow green into a fainter bluer green, which just makes sense because the atmosphere is going to be offering more and more blue the farther and farther you get away. So just these tiny little subtle nuances add to the believability of his perspectives and his plein air paintings, even though there's such a chunkiness to his brushwork. I mean, look, some could even almost call it like a clumsiness, but it's not airbrushed, you know, it's not silky. There's a chunkiness to it that makes it so believable and so gripping. You know, you can almost reach out and sculpt out the form, you know, you feel it. And it's possessive. Okay, actually I need to show you one more. This is the Bodmer oak in the forest of Fontainebleau in 1865. Again, he's 25 years old. This is a gigantic canvas. Well, maybe not. 96.2 centimeters by 129 centimeters. I mean, not small. Metropolitan Museum of Art is housing this beautiful painting. Look at that. I mean, look at the dappled treatment of the sunlight on the leaves. It's just so believable. And the bark, the tree itself, is reaching this kind of incredibly dark brown, almost black. And it's just, that higher opacity makes it so satisfying to look at. I mean, do you see how it is kind of sculpted in the way that he does these trees? I mean, you can see it. He's carving out the space, and then he punctures the fabric of the tree with these spots of blue. You see that? I mean, it's not even, you know, you can tell he didn't prepare the sky before he planted in the trees. He punctures the trees with sky, and you get this satisfying, almost like you take a piece of silk or muslin and you start pricking it with the paintbrush, you know, and it's a really, again, it's just a satisfying way of painting. And it was new, you know, this isn't something that, we're kind of oversaturated with impressionist style in our contemporary lives, but this is fresh. He's reinventing something. It's not very academic, it's not overused, and I appreciate it. So we're going to leave off, we only made it to page 36, and we have 580 pages to go through, so there's plenty, don't worry. We're gonna have plenty of conversation to talk about Monet, but he's worth investing time into learning. You know, Monet is one of those giants that you need an appreciation for if you really want to get serious about landscape painting, even if you do have a more academic style. So I hope this was thoroughly enjoyable for you all. I feel like taking a nap because it was just so relaxing. I love talking to you and sitting back and just listening to some calm music and talking about Monet. So I'll catch you for the next video. It'll probably be on progress on Thetis. I'm looking over the studio and I've been doing some work on her, so I think that'll be exciting to do a little time lapse of that. Anyway, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.